so many useful skills that I never would have learned otherwise. To me, the most important skill I learned was public speaking. Before my speech class with Miss Seibel sophomore year, I would always get stage fright. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say I enjoy giving speeches now. However, I'm able to present information and stay comfortable with myself in front of others. And personally, I can tell the difference between a speech given by a student who has not gone through that class and by a student who has. But that was not the only class we took. Freshman year began with Introduction to Political Science, which, as you can tell from the title, was pretty boring. But we had to get the basics down. A couple students unfortunately left the program, and it sucks for them, because every class after that was amazing. Next semester we took state and local government, and each student was assigned a county to present on for the midterm. I was given Kings County, which I knew absolutely nothing about. I came home, asked my dad, and he told me they were known for prisons. Well, I got through that, and then came our final. It was a five-member group, 2-hour presentation. The day of our final, my group went into the CIVITAS room, Ms. Reed's room, and we were about to set up our PowerPoints when we realized we had forgotten to email Mr. Nelson in advance. We scurried all over campus looking for him. With 5 minutes to spare, we found him. He was great, and he started setting it up right away. But I still needed to buy my group some time. Instead of giving a 25-minute speech, I gave a 30-minute speech without my PowerPoint that I was expecting to aid me. And this was before our speech class with Ms. Seibel. I was extremely proud of myself, as I was able to adapt to a very difficult situation, in my opinion at least. And at that point, I knew I'd be able to get through high school. So sophomore year, we took Speech and International Relations, my personal favorite. At the beginning of the year, we blindly chose a country out of the hat, and we were expected to follow this country in the news throughout the semester, and then we'd have 2 model UNs, one for the midterm and one for the final. I chose the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which, as you know, not very democratic and not much of a republic. But I was up for the challenge. For our first model UN, I wrote a resolution trying to convince my class to send me 1 million peacekeepers and millions of dollars to help my government to aid my government in mining abundant resources. Luckily for me, they had no idea how corrupt I was. They approved the resolution, and Ms. Reed loved it. It reminded her of a couple years back when a student who had Russia was able to convince the class to allow him to drill in the Arctic for oil. I love international relations so much because first of all, I find the curriculum very interesting, but also it was very current and relevant, and so it was really easy for me to become engaged. Junior year, we took Philosophy of Political Thought. It was a difficult semester because I had to balance it with the infamous United States history homework, APUSH, and it was very stressful. But it was a lot of fun digging into the minds of my classmates and learning about the world from dozens of different points of views. However, by the end of the semester, being a very logical and mathematically oriented person, I got really frustrated how there was never an answer to anything, or there was always tons of answers to everything. But enough about classes. CIVITAS is all about getting out into the community. Community. Our first requirement of community activism is 100 hours of community service. The majority of my community service I did with the Sacramento Food Bank. One Saturday a month, me and my family and I would go out to a Sacramento Food Bank's mobile food distribution. There, we would unload the semi-trucks, set up the tables with the food in the bags, bag the produce, and hand it out to the clients. There, the emphasis was to be healthy, as we handed out produce, bread, milk, and eggs. Personally, I liked it because there were some foods, like tomatillos, for example, that the clients weren't exactly sure what to do with them. We were allowed to tell them what it was and give them healthy recipes to use the food with. Other community service opportunities I did were I helped my friend Noah Lightman, who's coming on after me, with his Turkeys for America, and I also volunteered at Loaves and Fishes a couple times. Also, at the end of sophomore year, I started tutoring my friends. I loved it so much that I continue tutoring to this day. I tutor at least once a week in mathematics. Now, CIVITAS has one big fundraiser every year, the pancake breakfast. And every year, the freshmen are put in charge of organizing it. My freshman year, we had 5 committees: decorations, advertisements, donations, ticket sales, and food prep. I chose to be on the donations committee, and my friend Noah and I, we went out to about a dozen restaurants, getting great donations for a fundraiser. The difficult part was getting everybody in the class involved. Despite Miss Reed's constant pestering about what we had done to help the breakfast, some people just wouldn't get involved. But in the end, it worked out great. The day of the breakfast was pretty stressful as we had to prepare the food, prepare the cafeteria, and keep our guests happy. But I loved it. It was a great experience, and my favorite part was when my friend Guillermo was dressed up as a blueberry pancake for people to take pictures with. And you guys probably don't know Guillermo, but he's like 6 feet, 200, so he's a big guy, and it was great. So, another important aspect of CIVITAS is our 75-hour internship. I did mine with Senator Darrell Steinberg, and Nick was my fantastic mentor over last summer. And I loved it so much that I decided to exceed my minimum of 75 hours. This internship provided me with an experience in a professional environment. My primary responsibility was responding to constituent emails, written letters, and phone calls. Phone calls were by far the trickiest task, as while I would occasionally get some callers that just wanted to talk or made me laugh, the majority of the callers were just constituents calling to complain. And trust me, angry constituents were not fun to deal with. They always seemed to know what the right policy was for the state, and somehow it was never the same as what Senator Steinberg thought. So I had to politely disagree with them. I learned that functioning under pressure in the workplace is necessary, but at the same time, it was acceptable for me to say, "Please hold while I speak to my supervisors," because I wasn't expected to know the answer to every single situation that came up. My favorite caller was Governor Brown. He had accidentally called the district office trying to reach Senator Steinberg's home. The civic student in me desperately wanted to talk to him about politics, but I was very restrained and told him that I was an intern at the office, at which point he abruptly hung up. I love my mentors, thank you so much, Nicholas. They gave me great advice, and they always knew what obscure agency to send a client to for whatever problem they had. They taught me that behaving in a tactful, diplomatic manner is critical in my career. Now, my biggest achievement in CIVITAS was my senior project. It was this last October, so just 2 months ago, and it was a forum on Proposition 34, which is, as you probably know, a ballot measure to eliminate the state's death penalty, which did not pass, but that's okay. My first hurdle was finding quality speakers, and I wasn't sure if this would be possible to get speakers to come and talk about such an important topic at a high school. Luckily, I happened to mention this to my rabbi at my synagogue's annual softball game. He recommended 2 speakers. One is a lawyer who goes to my synagogue. He had originally written the death penalty for California, but since then has changed his opinion on the matter. The other was a man who, I'll be showing you pictures of this by the way. Another was the man who had spent 17 years on death row in Florida before DNA testing proved him innocent. I was thrilled, but if CIVITAS has taught me anything, it is to be fair to both sides. So I emailed my district attorney's office asking if they had any speakers that they would be willing to provide for the opposition to the proposition, which would be in favor of the death penalty. They graciously offered me a deputy district attorney, and I knew everything would be perfect from there on out. But I was wrong. They decided that it wasn't fair for them to have 1 speaker as opposed to 2, and thus half as much time. I conceded and allowed her to bring a victim's relative. From there, everything would be perfect, right? No. Next, my contact for the ex-convict insisted upon the fact that nobody from the other side be present for fear of being disrespected. A lengthy email conversation ensued before I finally negotiated a format acceptable to both parties. And I won't go into details on those, but it was brutal. So I learned lots of lessons from this experience. First of all, I completely underestimated the passion with which these speakers approached such controversial topics. I was a little upset at how they relied so heavily on emotional appeals, and they seemed not to mention very much factual evidence. Also, I was a little upset, but it's understandable, that they didn't exactly agree with how I thought the project ought to unfold. Which brings me to my next topic, that persistence is necessary throughout life. I was very lucky that my rabbi had these two speakers, seemingly out of the blue, but I still had to go through an intense process and exert a lot of effort in order to get things done. In the end, everyone was happy. The speakers were grateful for getting their information out, my peers loved it, and I learned great skills on how to host a presentation. Well, that's my CIVITAS experience. CIVITAS has provided me with tons of opportunities that I never would have had otherwise. I learned so much about politics, and I have a better idea of how I can help my community when I get up. And I'm very grateful for everything that CIVITAS has done for me. These are just the speakers. This was the lawyer who wrote the death penalty. His name is Mr. Donald Heller, but he was actually
Or if you want to dim one of the lights.
Yeah, and Heller actually was one of the, this was hilarious when I saw him again, he was one of the original signers on the CIVITAS.
Just one.
I think just the, well, it looked kind of nice dark, but he was one of the original signers
Yeah,
of the
okay.
CIVITAS documents 20 years ago.
Mm.
He was the original supporter.
So there's him in action. So this was Juan Melendez. He was the ex-convict, and he was very interactive with the crowd.
Yeah.
Everyone really liked him. He was fun. He actually told me about he's been everywhere because he's devoted to eliminating the death penalty. And he told me that he'd been to the high school that Barack Obama has gone to, and he's gone everywhere for this type of stuff. So I was thrilled that I was able to get him. And so that's him out with the crowd.
Was he a Californian?
No, he was on, I don't know where he's originally from, but he was on Florida's death row.
He's Puerto Rican, and I think he may have been an immigrant.
Yeah.
He couldn't speak English when they arrested him.
So this was the deputy district attorney. She was speaking in favor of the death penalty. And this was a victim's relative. And while I'm happy that they came and spoke, but I felt that they relied too much on emotions. I didn't get enough, facts, like what's wrong with the death penalty, how it's enforced right now, what needs to be fixed, stuff like that. And then here's just a different angle. And then afterwards we had a little Q&A. And so that's it, I believe. Yep. Any questions?
Aaron's project brought in more students and student interest than any project, and there was probably, our library is supposed to hold comfortably like 200, and we had over 300 kids crammed in there, and there was no aisle, and it was quiet. It was quiet in the room. And it was like, this is a high school, and it's never quiet in a room. They were really intently listening. Questions for Aaron? Past project, his experiences?
I was curious, you said that some of the people you were interacting with wanted you to do the project differently. Were you just referring to the debate format, or were there other things they wanted you to do differently as well?
No, it was just like the ex-convict he wanted to be there, but his contact didn't want to be there, so I had to just rearrange the format, have him go first and stuff. But it worked out.
Take him out of the room when the attorney came in, and then he decided he still wanted to be there, so we brought him back in, and then the handlers were upset with us because we brought him back in. It was really interesting because, he was happy to stay. He said, I want to stay and listen to what they have to say, and they were saying, oh, you have to go. And so there was this undercurrent going on the whole time that Aaron was trying to just keep things going. Anything else?
I'm curious about your thoughts about the actual Proposition 34. As I recall, it seemed to be ahead in the polls for a while, and then when the actual vote occurred, it lost with a fairly substantial margin. Did you analyze that at all? Do you have any thoughts about what the current state of California's view of the death penalty is? I know it's
not
a
really.
project, but
I mean, I can tell you what I believe, but I haven't analyzed it, sorry.
Did you have a sense that there is a trend one way or the other going on, or?
At our school, we had a mock election, and I believe it failed pretty heavily. Was it like 60-40?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
so,
kids definitely said no.
I mean, my friends were mixed. Like, I had some friends saying, like, I wouldn't kill anyone no matter what. I had some friends saying, like, oh, stop it, why they murdered someone else. So, I don't know. I think it's mixed. It's obviously a really touchy subject, so.